Hi, my name is Gabe Muniz, and I'm a solutions engineer here at OpenSpace. I've been with the company for the last couple of years, and I've spent most of that time working with the customer success team, and that's allowed me to work with some really incredible customers. And so the idea behind this panel is to take some of the very best and have them discuss the ways in which they're maximizing the value that they're getting from OpenSpace. And so we're going to kick it off with Bryan Felix talking about how to get the most out of the OpenSpace core product. So she's coming from Swinerton. We have Kevin Ott from Turner talking about how to get the most out of our new Clearsight product, how to enhance your progress tracking processes on site. And finally, we're going to have Kelsey Gager from Suffolk talk about how to go from a single project pilot to enterprise-wide rollout. And we're going to be kicking it off with Bryan. So Bryan, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Awesome. Thank you, Gabe. I'm Bryan Felix. As Gabe mentioned, I work with Swinerton. I'm the regional virtual design and construction manager for Southern California. So we cover San Diego, LA, Orange County, and then we're closely working with our Hawaii group as well. Yeah. So our primary role as VDC is to implement the right technologies for our projects that add value. And I'll go through how OpenSpace has added a lot of value to Swinerton. Going through these slides, I really had to narrow it down to how we've used OpenSpace. Our old way of taking progress photos, hopefully none of you are still doing it this way, but on the server somewhere you probably have dated months and years and more folders and then a bunch of images, and then you click on an image with a random number and you get a random picture on your job site. So this was an issue that we saw at Swinerton that we needed to just improve the process. It wasn't adding any value, it was taking up a lot of resources and a lot of server space. So jumping to OpenSpace, there was a lot of value add there. The time savings itself is self-explanatory. You don't have someone walking around the job site with a camera or their cell phone snapping pictures and then dumping them on the server somewhere. The other thing that was really important to us when we adopted OpenSpace was the ease of use. So you can pull somebody into your office or go to the job site and train them in a matter of 10, 15 minutes. It's very easy to use. Our superintendents use it, our PEs use it, our interns use it. The importance of the completeness of documentation. So being that it's so easy, whoever's walking the job site can walk it multiple times a day, walk it thoroughly. It's very hands-off, as I'm sure most of you guys know. The ease of accessing the documentation, so especially when COVID originally hit, a lot of our staff was off of our job sites, including superintendents and safety. And to be able to just pick up your phone and walk the job site and drop field notes and do the split screen and everything that it does is very valuable. There's faster turnaround time between the field and the office. So if there is an issue or a concern that comes up on site, making that phone call and being able to look at the same thing at the same time saves a lot of time. So that communication between the field and office is really improved. So another use that we have for OpenSpace is constructability. So again, I really feel like COVID kind of forced us into using our tools more efficiently and in a more innovative way. So we started doing constructability reviews. We would do our job walks. Our subcontractors were typically not allowed on site due to COVID. And we were able to give them, as long as it was okay with the client, we were able to give them access to the job walk that we walked. So not only did they have access to it when they weren't able to actually physically walk the site, but this is so valuable because you don't have a bunch of people walking the site taking pictures on their cell phone. And again, they don't know where they are, what direction they're facing. So having this complete documentation of the project was very valuable. And then we took it a step further from there, where we would get the design models. This is really valuable when you have existing conditions. You get the design models and you plop that into the BIM compare, and our VDC team would just walk through and compare the design intent with the actual conditions in the field. And we were able to pick out and help the design team identify some really early potential issues. So these are a couple examples that we pulled. The top left one is new mechanical units placed right where there's existing to remain mechanical piping and gravity lines. The one to the right is a large conduit rack that is all existing to remain, and they had new equipment placed there in their design. The one in the bottom left was existing HVAC on the roof, and the new model compare the new duct, trying to sliver its way through that existing duct and elevator machine room, which clearly didn't work. So just being able to provide this information to the design team very, very early on before we even were able to mobilize on site was very valuable. Another use that we have for all of our projects, we do a compiled MEP-F deck penetration file. It's instead of submitting multiple submittals to structural for review and approval, it's one composite so they can really see what's going on a deck. This is to prevent anything that's potentially happens later on where, you know, maybe structural architectural didn't realize that there was a cluster of penetrations in one location, and then everybody's scrambling on the deck to make changes and make sure that we don't upset the architect because now we have to bump a wall out or something like that. So being able to compare the two of these in real life and our submittal that was reviewed and approved, and point out maybe there's a concern with the super, they think that something's missing or something's out of place, being able to just jump in there real quick and walk what they're seeing is very valuable. Obviously, the progress that we have going all the way back from a pre-pour to almost finish, we do self-perform or self-perform general contractors. So being able to support our self-perform groups with basically foolproof documentation, support documentation for anything. And this is for our subcontractors too. Stuff happens on site, especially at nighttime in certain neighborhoods, and being able to have this stuff documented adds a lot of transparency to the project throughout the project. This is just a field conflict example that was able to be resolved by having my hands on the project in OpenSpace. It was the typical phone call from a PM saying that my project engineer says that there's piping coming down through the penthouses everywhere, and knowing that there's no ceilings in the penthouses, I knew that wasn't my fault, I'll say, because I BIM'd the job and I wouldn't have put piping through the penthouses. So I was able to jump in, I go look at the penthouses, I see where the pipe's coming through. It was not something that I coordinated during the coordination process. I was able to jump up on the next level and peel back the layers of time and see what that pipe was. And then in the notes, I dropped a field note. I added my team members directly, and I attached the actual floor plan of the pipes that were called out, and I sent it right to my team. So being able to resolve that problem within 5 minutes or less compared to the old ways of maybe a couple hours, depending on if you could even figure out where they are on the deck, or without having to go do a job walk. This again, it increases that trust of field and office, and it also helps with the adoption of the coordination process and being able to do that split screen model compare and show how much value that adds by coordinating an entire job virtually and then actually building that job, and it holds people accountable.
Absolutely.
And then lastly, I'm sure all of you experience projects where we have very strict closeout requirements or very strict BIM specs. Everything has to be modeled, and there's some projects where we have the only job that they have is to look at every single model and tell you what's missing and send it back to you until it's fixed. So on a project like this, you can kind of see how big the floor plate is on the floor plan, but to have to walk this job like in person and check everything like this would take weeks and weeks, probably months. So to be able to do the model compare, And knowing that these models that we're comparing it against are what is actually being submitted, and then picking out those little things it saves a ton of time. So we've been using it for model validation as well.
Awesome. And let's see. So thank you, Bryan. We're going to bring you back at the end for questions. And next up is going to be Kevin Ott with progress tracking and how he was able to improve kind of the flow on his site using our new Clearsight product. And Kevin, if you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, thank you, Gabe. Thank you for the opportunity to be with this group today. My name is Kevin Ott. I work with Turner Construction Company. I've been with Turner for 22 years now, and the bulk of my experience has been within the healthcare field. So we do a lot of healthcare here in Northeast Ohio. And I'd like to take you with a lessons learned project that we've worked with OpenSpace over the last couple of years on a orthopedic surgery center that we just completed that was open for surgery as of yesterday, as a matter of fact. So got a great success story to tell you here and show you how we've utilized this. So as we look forward here, we've got, we'll speak about our progress we had here with the Crystal Clinic Orthopedic Center. It's about an $80 million project for a private consortium of for-profit physicians. It was a 180,000 square feet structure. It was 60 private patient rooms, 12 operating rooms, had an underground parking garage, and their whole mantra was they wanted it to feel like it was a hotel and not like it was a standard stark white healthcare facility. And with the utilizing of what Bryan just showed us with the 360-degree camera, we kept pushing OpenSpace to see what else was out there, and we delved into the Clearsight progress tracking portion of this. So we used a lot of our last planner system that we're going to talk about here in depth of how we utilize that. Ultimately, we were able to bring this job in under budget and brought it in 5 weeks early. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So in the whole mantra of lean construction and that concept of always trying to work on trying to be continuous improvement. So I'm sure we've talked about our project engineers and our superintendents and our interns and that. So in the upper right here, I think a little bit of the old school is that you give them a 2D drawing, you give them a piece of paper, you send them out in the field or walk on the job and see all the highlighting of sheet metal, ductwork, different piping. It's the whole laborious walk the job, see how the tracking's going. Then they have to come back to the trailer and crunch a bunch of numbers and verify what the manpower, trade workforce count was for the day and so on and so forth. So that was one way to do it. That's a little old school, but we still utilize that. A little picture just below that is we've tried to implement that, and now we've got some nice Excel diagrams here that did a lot of those calculations for us by just implementing some of those data that we did from our project walkthroughs, manually recording those, trying to get some data feedback. But once again, it's very laborious. It's very constrained. You're doing work 2 and 3 times. It just wasn't getting us where we wanted to be. So if we can flip the next slide, please. So utilizing the last planner system, we've done all of our 360-degree imaging, try to work on measuring our work in place. But talking with Jess and Phil and Gabe and our team down there at OpenSpace, Clearsight was brought to us. So what better way to utilize progress improvement with Clearsight for progress tracking than artificial intelligence? So we welcomed them to the team and worked on getting this established. So if you go to the next slide, please. All right. So one way that this Clearsight was able to help us was that it really meshed well with what the program that we already had established here on the project site. Early on, we and our superintendents and our entire project team developed batch sizes. And if everybody knows is, in order to keep workflow on a job consistent, you don't want a lot of spikes and valleys of your trade workforce, and you want to be consistent with the message so that they can get very on-time deliveries to the project site. So what we've given you a batch size of how we implemented it on. This is a typical 3rd floor. This is a floor foot plate. And what we're doing here is that every area is about the exact same square footages. So we're trying to keep that consistent across all of the floors. Fine-tuning everything as we go along on a daily basis, but it all starts with a plan. This was our plan. So we go to the next slide, please.
And one thing I'd like to point out too is the kind of counterclockwise direction that the progress goes, because we're going to be able to see that in the upcoming GIFs.
No, it's a good point. So utilizing the camera as we do in our walkthroughs, the progress tracking the Clearsight allows us to do is you see all these documents. As Gabe pointed out, we worked counterclockwise just because of the way that that floor was developed and all the private patient rooms. And what they're showing you here is the progress tracking of all of our walls. I think what's key to note here is that the green lines show the path that we took through all of our walkthroughs to get a good replication of what's on the job site. But more importantly, it's the color depiction that you get a real quick image of what's complete, what's not complete, and how fast it was being completed. At any given time, I as a project manager could sit back and look at this on an ongoing basis and know exactly how the progress was tracking. Were we actually utilizing our batch sizes? Were we flowing through the process of each floor the way we should be doing it? And are we following it through with our schedule? We have a master schedule. We broke that down to our 6-week batch size schedule and our 6-week look ahead schedule on a weekly basis with each of the trades during our weekly coordination meetings. You see all these different colors. It tells you what's been done, what's in progress, and what's been completed, and what percentage that it is. And this is doing nothing but more than just walking through the job site with the camera. The true artificial intelligence gives us this data. There's no double manipulation, no double manpower, not having to do the work twice. Next slide, please.
Yeah, so I just changed to the left to complete slide.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. I saw that.
Counterclockwise pattern, and then we also have the ceilings slide in here where you can kind of see the same thing going on.
So we went from walls to not complete, and it's giving you that percentage, and then you can see as the ceilings were going in and it was being developed fully. These are great charts. There's not a single tool will allow you to do this, and Clearsight's not, it's a compilation of what it works with all of your other tools in a lean process. And these ceilings are going in a counterclockwise, as I mentioned. You'll see some other blurbs in there is because in each of these private patient rooms, there was drywall ceilings in the private bathrooms. So that's part of the purple that you're seeing because those are all interior to each of those rooms. So otherwise, you can see the work was, what percent of the work has been complete. And it was very simple data entry early on. All you need is from your trade partners when you bring them on board is just need to have a couple simple dimensions of from their takeoffs when they actually took off the job before they were awarded the job. So there wasn't a whole lot of additional work for the project team to implement at any given time.
It's actually kind of nice. We've updated that, Kevin. So all you need now is to send us the drawing set. So
well, that's fantastic.
You were with us right at the beginning. Yeah, I think it was
early on.
Clearsight project, but now we're rolling. We've got about 70 projects using Clearsight today, and you know a lot of that thanks goes to you for helping us develop it.
Well, thank you, Gabe. So talking here, one of these things is another report that your data graph coming out of here. For those of you that utilize lean processes in the last planner system, we talk a lot about on a weekly basis with our trade foreman in our weekly meetings of percent plan complete. And the percent plan complete is our ability based on the batch sizes to plan our work our plan, and how are we progressing against our plan. So every week we're developing our weekly work plan, looking at our 6-week look ahead schedule. We're developing these systems. That percent plan complete at the end of the week tells us what areas we completed on time, which were done, to be able to predict our work. One of the things I like to point out here is on that bottom graph, you see how that line's fairly horizontal. That means that those batch sizes were able to flow in a very consistent basis, which means that we had consistent delivery of materials to the job site. We had consistent trade workforce on the job site. We didn't have a lot of peaks and valleys. It was a very consistent line, which means at the end of the day that we were able to manage a very efficient site for not only ourselves and the owner for a great outcome in a timely fashion, but we're making the trades efficient. And if you understand efficiency, obviously that's going to bring dollars back to the organization and into the future as well. So it's hard to explain, but I mean, until I actually take our percent complete and look at these drawings and these charts that Clearsight provided us, it's always you think you're doing a great job, but the data actually reflected that we actually achieved what we were trying to achieve in this project, which was pretty amazing. Made us feel pretty good. It just validated what they were able to provide for us in the everyday world out there with on the job site. So as you can see here, as I talked a little bit about, is that these are the additional tools. We had our 6-week look-ahead schedule that we implemented. We worked through those weekly work plans. We talked about that percent plan complete. These are just additional tools, but in the bottom right there, you can kind of see our percent plan complete chart through over the period of almost 2 years there. You can see it's pretty consistent, but it's got a lot of peaks and valleys, which says that, you know, some weeks we were able to plan and work really well, and some weeks we did not. But I think the slide just above that with what Clearsight told us is that despite the peaks and valleys of that, we were able to provide efficiency to the trade workforce that was on the job site, which is it made us better planners of our work. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, is that Clearsight doesn't take place of all your other tools on the job. It just augments and it increases your chances of success and your ability to run a successful and efficient project site. So these are, so on the left, you can see what Clearsight provided us. Towards the bottom left, you can see the nice percent plan complete. Upper right shows as our weekly work plan of how we work through that. And then that was the development of, we graded that on a weekly basis, which gave us our percent plan complete. And then the nice color charts that are listed on the job site of what was complete and what wasn't. So many tools or resources that pull together to allow us to be very successful. So at the end of the day, we've talked about the validation of this, of what it does for an owner. Validating work in place. So a work in place is always a big thing when you're tying your workflows, your cash flows, and your work in place with your financial institutions. On the Crystal Clinic, due to the high volume of the job being $80 million, we had over 7 financial institutions that participated in having to come out and walk the job and wanted to know what was being done. But the ability to be able to produce these charts and that helped us prove without a shadow of a doubt that we were actually performing the work as discussed, as we were putting on our pencil copies for review by the owner. It made us extremely efficient. But I think the biggest thing that I like to take away from this is that it's giving us a competitive advantage now, but more importantly, it's giving our trade partners and trade workforce a competitive advantage in the future to know that when we're trying to win work and they're bidding on work, they know that we're going to manage the job successfully. We're going to keep them very efficient. They're going to hopefully give us the better numbers in the marketplace to be able to allow us to win more work. So these tools and resources that we're utilizing is helping us to be better builders and more efficient builders and be able to procure more work.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you, Kevin. And I believe that is our last slide. Again, we'll bring you back for questions at the end. And next up, we're going to have Kelsey Gager from Suffolk. And Kelsey, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Gabe. Hi, everyone. I'm Kelsey Gager. And for a quick about me, I've been with Suffolk for 7 years now. And during my time at Suffolk, I've had various roles from operations and technology to innovation. But most recently, I'm a member of our operational excellence team here at Suffolk. So as part of that, I oversee our standard technology toolbox, our ops innovation team, and a few other initiatives. But today, I'm here to tell you about our journey at Suffolk in taking OpenSpace from an experiment on one project to a full-scale national solution. So with that, let me start by telling you a little bit about Suffolk. So we were founded in 1982 by John Fish. He's our CEO and single shareholder. This makes us incredibly nimble and agile. We're able to move quickly, which really helps when it comes to keeping up with data and technology trends, data investments, and really innovation overall. So OpenSpace in Suffolk. Let's start at the beginning of the journey. OpenSpace started on one single project for Suffolk. The project was a water park in upstate New York. The name of the project was the Cartwright. We actually found out about OpenSpace through our Suffolk Technologies group, which I'll talk more about a bit later. But the Suffolk Tech group wanted to see OpenSpace in action in the field. And so the Cartwright was chosen as a test site. It's in upstate New York. It's kind of remote, and it's sort of a perfect initial use case for OpenSpace to see the value to us as Suffolk and also our clients. So we ran that through our pilot process, and it began to scale. And we went from one project to over half of our projects in less than 3 years. which equates to about a 3,500% expansion rate over the course of the 3 years, which we thought was pretty incredible.
Yeah, the Cartwright is actually that pink bubble in the northeast, kind of pink peachish that starts us out there. But yeah, very impressive growth.
And kind of cool to see the geographic diversity as well. So let's talk about that process. So how did we scale the solution? How did we go from that sort of initial experiment to a national solution in a somewhat intelligent and thoughtful and strategic way? So first I want to touch on our innovation ecosystem here at Suffolk. And if you kind of look across the top of this slide, we have 3 sort of primary verticals or value props or whatever you want to call it. But we invest and we innovate and we build. And underneath those value props, we have sort of specific initiatives or groups that work under those umbrellas. Suffolk Tech is our corporate venture capital arm. I mentioned this on our last slide, but Suffolk Tech is where we heard about OpenSpace originally. Under Innovate, we have our construction solutions team. That's our ops innovation team. They run our entire pilot process. They work with our ops people. They're sort of the boots on the ground for all things innovation efforts at Suffolk. And then lastly, we have our operations teams and under the build vertical there. And at Suffolk, we're so fortunate to have some really incredible innovation champions within operations, which really helps kind of take hold of some of the initiatives that we run. As you can see under these groups, they sort of contribute to an overall ecosystem. Solutions are sourced in a variety of ways. They populate what we call the funnel, and they come through when they come into us in different ways. So Suffolk Tech sometimes identifies something like OpenSpace, or a project team identifies a problem that needs a solution or a potential solution that they want to pilot. So however they come to us, they go through that pilot process, which you see in that circle there in the middle, which I'll dig into in just a second. But once we've sort of gone through the rounds and the winners float to the top, they have an opportunity to become a national solution at Suffolk, which means that we would operationally implement and standardize the solution. So with that, let's talk specifically about the pilot process. So like I said, we try to be thoughtful about our approach, and we've sort of devised a process-oriented approach to innovation at Suffolk. We've learned a lot along the way. There are so many solutions in the construction technology universe. I think the last stat that I heard from our Suffolk Tech team was in the 7,000 to 8,000 range. So, you know, I read an ENR article recently that said we're in the golden age of construction technology, and I think we can all kind of agree with that. So there's a lot of solutions out there, and I think having a systemized approach to intaking, testing, evaluating, scaling is hypercritical. So in our instance, we started with one experiment. It's low risk, it's low commitment, it's on one job, and you get to see how it goes. As part of that, and so we're sort of following along on that top left graphic there, it's really important to have a solution champion. So someone on the project who's invested in seeing that this experiment actually happens. That doesn't mean that they're responsible for the solution working or being successful or being a total failure. It's actually more about just making sure the pilot actually happens. You know, a lot of the time, someone will kind of say that they'll do something and they won't out in the field. So you have to be really tightly tied to that innovation champion. We've had plenty of solutions that didn't work, but having the champion it along the way is still really important. If it goes well, we scale it to an initial pilot, which means it's on 3 to 4 jobs. We try to get it in different regions at that point. Different markets demand different solutions. We want to see how it tests out across markets. And during this phase, we get a little bit more detailed on our ROI data collection process. So I'll dig into that in just a second. But if the ROI results are good, and it's always relative to other solutions, right? So like the ROI would be compared against other solutions. But if it fares well against other solutions in the pipeline, it continues to bubble and scale up. We socialize it, we message the results, and it's sort of organically and through our standardization process scales and expands. We've done this for a lot of solutions. You can see in that upper right-hand corner there, we have 62 active projects using pilots, last that we checked, and we keep a pretty tight eye on those. And then out of those 62 active projects using pilots, we have 192 pilots on active projects. So it equates to about 3 pilots per project, which is really interesting to me. It kind of shows that innovation clusters and those champions are really that as critical as we think they are. So back to ROI collection, there on the bottom of the screen that you see, we kind of think about ROI, like return on investment, in a lot of different ways. It's not just one thing. It's not just qualitative. It's not just quantitative. It's not what one person says. It's not anecdotal. We try to have a really analytical approach to it in terms of capturing that data and analyzing it, which is hard to do. But I think we've developed a process that at least works for us. After implementation, we send out a quarterly survey. It's just a Microsoft form. It goes out via email. We ask the ops champion to answer a series of questions, which is designed to quantify the value of the solution on their job. We aggregate all of that information and we analyze that info as it sort of comes in. And we do that for every single solution that we're running. So all 192 pilots ongoing right now. And we do that every single quarter. So it's a lot of data that we get. It's a lot of data points. The things we look at are listed there on the right-hand side. ROI, which is just return on investment. NPS, which is an indication, a net promoter score, which is an indication of loyalty to the product. A star rating, which is sort of our own secret sauce or blend of how the solution is going to rank against others. It's a really good way to look at qualitative and quantitative information in a blended format. And then lastly, testimonials. So we want people to add some sort of narrative or some color to what they're trying to express. So we do collect just, testimonials as to how a solution's doing. But overall, this is sort of like a multi-dimensional approach to understanding the value of innovation. And as I mentioned, it really incorporates those qualitative and quantitative aspects. So what do we get for OpenSpace specifically? And this is a lot of the data points from one of the data pools that we did. It kind of reflected good testimonials, which you'll see there on the right. We have a lot of different super users, power users, ops champions that are big advocates for OpenSpace. So we have a lot of positive testimonials. But what was really important to see was that there were a lot of sources of value. So how does OpenSpace help our teams? In many ways, which is great. It means a great foundational product that addresses a lot of problems that we have out in the field. And it's really great when a solution is foundational to many use cases. But more impressively, in terms of the product, we had positive NPS. That's great. That means like anything positive when it comes to NPS is good. Anything above 0, it means that your audience is more loyal than not. We have extremely high ROI for OpenSpace. So ROI is reflected as a percentage, which is kind of funky, but it was very high for OpenSpace. And I'm not going to show you guys our calc total savings per week. We kind of keep that a little bit closer and share that with internally, but we do calc that. And so just a note that we do calc that. But the questions we ask in our survey determine that star rating, which, as I mentioned, it's sort of similar to a Yelp score. And we kind of use those to do the apples to apples comparisons. And I always say, like, the different solutions in the market are like, they do such different things. They do, and they add value in so many different ways, and they address different problems. So they're sort of like bananas and pears and apples and oranges, but you have to create some sort of baseline for comparing those solutions so that you can have some data and information to drive your decision making when it comes to scaling a solution or not. And that's what we strive to do. So once that solution has reached that national bucket, which means basically we have positive ROI data, we understand use cases, we kind of understand where it's going to go within our processes. Once that's all sort of been done, it's sort of gone up that process map that I showed you guys, we send it to our council for review. And they make the decision to standardize a solution or leave it as a highly scaled pilot. So standardization typically means that the tool is basically expected to be on all new projects. It's essentially like a company-wide standardization process, but there's a ton of work that it takes to get there and to be able to get there as a company. So I'm going to walk kind of high level through how we think about standardization and how we thought about it when we approached it here at Suffolk. So communications plans, they're really important, right? You got to get everyone up to speed, everyone to know about this new standard. But before you can even go down that route, there is a ton of legwork and some serious cross-functional collaboration that has to take place between a lot of different stakeholders and groups within your company, likely, at least for us. So number one, you have to get your process in line. And I do not mean make a new SOP. I don't mean write a new process doc that just goes out and says use OpenSpace. That doesn't work well, at least for us. You have to figure out how to insert technology into existing processes to streamline value. So tech shouldn't be an additive process. You shouldn't just be using OpenSpace for the sake of using OpenSpace. You should be using OpenSpace to facilitate an existing process and potentially evolve it and hopefully make it more efficient. But it certainly just shouldn't be additive. So we looked at how do we actually incorporate this into our existing processes and leverage it as a more efficient tool, so it's really a selling point for operations. Another thing, standardize on hardware. We picked one camera and we went with it. And that has made the lives of our IT people easier. It's made the lives of our finance people easier. It's made the lives of our training group easier, standardizing on that one single piece of hardware. When it came to clients, materials and resources, creating client-facing materials that articulate the value of the solution are so important. We spent a lot of time on these. We worked and partnered with our marketing team extensively. You have to make them worthy, and you have to make them articulate the value of the technology in combination with your people. So why is it uniquely valuable to your organization, and why should your client buy into it in the case that you're using it? From a data perspective, we wanted to make expectations clear for our team. So make the standing visible, put it on your dashboards, incorporate it into your process checks, compliance, et cetera, whatever you use to measure success of your organization, incorporate the use of the technology into that tool. And then lastly, build out training. So if you go ahead and flip to the next slide, Gabe, I just want to show this video, which the OpenSpace team helped us create, which is great. But at Suffolk, we have sort of a YouTube style learning hub. It houses bite-sized digestible learning. And we built out content for this hub that's easy for people to sort of pull down. So we call it learning on demand. But essentially, it allows resources to be available as people onboard on a project, as people offboard on a project. People are at different stages of their life cycle. People's training needs are different at any given time. And if you make people take training at one point just to take training, they're not going to remember any of it. They have to apply it. So we build these kind of pull off the shelf, like I said, YouTube style videos that get uploaded to the platform. And I think best of all, we get our innovation champions to rep the tools on the platform. So they're the ones actually making the videos, showing their faces, talking about how they use the solution, why they use the solution. And that automatically makes the technology have the face of our operations teams right on it, which really helps sort of lend credibility to the solution right from the get-go. All right, so the dreaded question that every PX and PM is going to ask you when you say you're standardizing a technology tool is how much is this thing going to cost and how do I sell it, right? I'm sure you guys have heard that before. Yes, new technology typically does add cost. Yes, our data shows that it will pay for itself in the long run, and we can show you that. But I still think it's important to kind of identify strategies that help you take on those questions and help to sort of remove those constraints or barriers to entry for your project teams. So number one, early incorporation into the budget. So important. Money is cheaper during pre-con and estimating phases of the job. We actually defaulted our existing estimating platform to include the cost of OpenSpace when we went to standardize it. It's just automatically there when you go to create a proposal for a client. And that makes it so that clients are more open to sort of including those small costs early on at the beginning of the job. You want to get ahead of it. You want to have full visibility from the beginning so you're not going back and asking for more if you can. Right. So that's one strategy that we implemented is get as far upstream as possible when it comes to making asks for incorporating technology. Number two, not all projects are the same. We learned this early on. You don't want to just blanket charge every team the same amount of money. That's sort of the easy way out. It's also an easy way to make a lot of PMs and controllers upset with you. So instead, what we did is we kind of reviewed the projects based on feasibility of getting them to be able to pay. So for us, we broke the projects up into three kind of different groups. Number one was existing jobs. Number 2, jobs that hadn't inked contracts yet. And number 3 was jobs where we weren't even finalized. We were still sort of in the pre-con and early phases. So on the existing jobs front, you just want to push adoption without any regard to cost. So you kind of have to work with the project teams and be super flexible if they just don't have the money. For jobs that hadn't started, it's kind of a great opportunity to get in front of a client. We were actually really successful with getting clients early at the start of the jobs. We had a really high conversion rate. And again, like, great sales materials are always key, but having your people be able to speak to the tools themselves, I think that's another really important component. So empowering your PXs to feel like they can speak to the value of the tool and they know what it is, it makes the sell rate a lot higher in terms of working with the clients. Number 3, present a technology bundle. So that's something that we actually did as well. So rather than just showing OpenSpace as a single line item in our new project, it's kind of part of a bigger bundle that allows us to have a little bit better control over the tech stack. And ultimately, it's just really critical as we look to standardize our data collection efforts with technology. And then lastly, offering a free trial. So this is sort of the last resort for us, especially with existing projects. But we've actually had a lot of success with getting clients sort of hooked onto OpenSpace just by giving them a free trial. And a specific example of this was recently here, actually in Boston. We had a client, it was a public project, and the client wasn't really sure they wanted to pay for the tool, wasn't really sure if they wanted to go ahead and sign up for it. And so we said, hey, why don't you guys just try it out? And we gave them a personal login, and then 30 days later, when it came to re-up, they were hooked. So it's definitely worth a shot to try the offer free trial route.
Nice.
And then, so what's next after scaling it? And at Suffolk, we sort of believe that you can't manage what you can't measure. We have a really data-minded culture and a really large data team as well that supports it. So as I mentioned earlier, when you're deciding whether to scale a product, the most important thing to kind of think about is value and saying, should we scale this? Should we bet on this? And you kind of need real numbers to back that up. Typically, it takes real numbers to convince people. But after you've made that decision to scale it, you've sort of already proven out the value. The success of what you're doing evolves from, should we scale this, to is the tool being leveraged effectively? So rather than looking at like, for example, ROI and NPS, you kind of move towards a model of adoption, which basically indicates how good are you as an organization at scaling. So you've already bought into the enterprise-wide solution. You've said every job has to use this. Now you're measuring how good are you at actually adopting the tool, because you've already gotten past that point of saying, should we actually scale this or not? So your success metrics basically evolve. So that's what we look at now. And I mentioned those like data and dashboards earlier, and that's the key success metric that we measure today. All right, so full circle. I know I said a lot, but full circle. We basically built this machine, and that helps us, that machine that we built, the pilot process, it helps identify solutions that are worth scaling. And I think that ultimately contributes to a bigger picture. In my mind, like the innovation and pilot process, the scaling of technology, the standardization of technology, all of that increases efficiency, and it ultimately betters project performance. And sort of by standardizing tech, it becomes cheaper for every job. So, and that's not just because you have an enterprise agreement that allows you to spread the cost across all jobs, which that's true. Yeah, you can lower your cost per project when you have an enterprise-wide agreement, but it's cheaper in other ways too. You have an entire organization of people that actually know how to use a standard set of tools. And you don't have to retrain people when they migrate from project to project. They just sort of pick up the toolbox and go, because you have that standardized set of tools. Which definitely sort of saves you and is cheaper for the organization overall. So you get better data collection, which leads to more opportunities for leveraging other tools like artificial intelligence. And that lower cost of tech and those increased efficiencies ultimately sort of become part of your brand. So if you're kind of moving around the circle there, you see your brand gets affected by sort of scaling these solutions, in that your tech-enabled people become part of your brand. So by having the people throughout the organization that know how to use a tool, they're really makes them uniquely valuable to you, the organization, and the client. And ultimately, that experience that you offer to your clients and your people, so from like a recruiting perspective, it's more consistent and arguably better. And then that ultimately kind of fuels the rest of the cycle, right? So like this generates demand for more technology in the future as people continue to have good experiences with technology, your people, your clients, and in the field. So innovation sort of fuels more innovation, and your toolbox just gets better and better over time, which I think is great. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Kelsey, and thank you so much to all of the panelists. Now I want to get everybody sort of together, and we're going to run through some questions, and I'll direct them to each person, but also feel free to jump in as you're answering questions. Looks like we don't have a whole lot of time left, but I'll try to kind of fire off some quickly. Bryan, we kind of had Kelsey talking about different ways that she sort of spread OpenSpace throughout the org. And I know that you've done a lot of the same with teams, Swinerton and SoCal. And I just would love to kind of hear more about how you did it. I thought it was great when you were talking about kind of improving that communication, but I'd love if you could share any stories or kind of strategies there.
Yeah, I think what helped the most at Swinerton was just getting it in front of people. Obviously, being able to have a project that was willing to test it out was our step one. And then from there, I took every opportunity I could to show it to whoever I could, whether that was in an interview with a client or maybe it was a struggle on another job that we had. And I said, you know, what would be a solution for this in the future is OpenSpace. And I would show them that. So it was really getting it in front of their face, and it really pushed adoption. They saw the value pretty quickly.
Definitely. And Kevin, we talked a lot about the last planner system and how you were able to get that consistency and sort of the robust tracking processes that you had even before OpenSpace. I'd be curious what your thoughts are on a team that's maybe not using Lean, if you could see them benefiting from OpenSpace use, but also Clearsight.
No, without a doubt. I mean, I think it all comes down to the efficiency level. I think a lot of our presentations hit on today. It's about the efficiency. It's about leveraging your resources, you know, utilizing a tool that doesn't make you do things 2 or 3 or 4 different times. It's the leveraging the tools allowed to do what it can do. In this particular instance, we're utilizing artificial intelligence with the way that you're behind the scenes programming, and artificial intelligence relays and captures the images and be able to get you the data, because ultimately the report outs or the deliverables goes on these dashboards, or they get put in front of the owners, it puts in front of your clients. For me, it was putting this data in front of the bank and the financial institutions to get fast, timely payment. It was about putting things in front of board of directors to get decisions made quickly and fast and efficient. So I just use the word efficiency. I mean, anybody that is on a lean journey or is trying to track progress, and it's just the way to go. I mean, it's hands down. I utilize it every day. I can't wait for the next big job to roll it out again. So.
Yeah, I feel like that was sort of a common theme in terms of that visibility that you're able to get to then make decisions that much faster, or Bryan, what you highlighted with being able to communicate with the team faster. And I think those increments, you know, like hours here, maybe a day or 2 there, can be really impactful. But Kelsey, we're running low on time here. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Nothing specific. I think it was great to hear from both Kevin and Bryan. I think I had never thought about using OpenSpace in the context of the last planner system for batch planning. So kind of a new use case that I was able to understand from today. So yeah, nothing to add on that front, but great to hear from the other panelists.
Oh, so we do actually have a little bit of time, and I do have a question for you, Kelsey. Sorry about that. You know, we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants here. One of my legs is falling asleep. These stools are no joke. I'm sure everybody would like to know, with enterprise rollouts, like the systems and processes you put in place, like without a doubt, kind of drive that forward. But I'm sure there's challenges along the way. I'd be curious to hear, was there any pieces of that process that were maybe more difficult than others, and were there strategies you kind of used to overcome that?
I think I really hit it sort of with the overcoming the cost question. I think that's by far the most common kind of question that we get or constraint that's raised when it comes to implementing it on our projects is how we're going to pay for it. I think you sort of have to have a strategic approach and everything sort of in place that helps take away the excuses. It's easy for people to say, oh, I don't know how to use it, or this wasn't incorporated early on. So I think if you can get in, like I mentioned, get in early and kind of set up the different components to allow adoption to occur. If you make things easier for people and you set up the rest of the kind of the requirements and the measurement tools around it well, I think people typically kind of take the path of least resistance. So and in our case, that's how we view it. And we definitely saw it in terms of adoption over time with operational pull as well. So yeah, I think the cost question is definitely was the hardest one to resolve.
That happens to align with one of our company values, simplify everything. So I really like that response. I think we're coming up on time now. So thank you so much to all of the panelists. It was great having you here and hearing the discussion. I'm sure everybody's loving it below. And we are going to have a discussion section after this. So if anybody is curious, wants to learn more, we're also going to have other customers and professionals in there as well and be able to kind of take and answer questions. But yeah, I think we're going to move it on to the next segment. Again, thank you so much. And yeah, we'll see everyone soon.
Awesome. Thank you.